Okay guys, I want to show you a new chess set, and this chess set it's very old, from the beginning 1800 or even it could be 1700. The game I want to show you instead it's kind of modern. So let's pay attention to one thing. You notice that this is the king. You say, why is the king? Because he's taller than the queen and he has this kind of double crown. Okay? Notice also interesting is the bishop. Notice that the bishop in reality has different names in different languages. So sometimes it's not a bishop. I think in French, it's a fool. Right, the clown of the court, the jest. This is the rook. Nice, right? And in that time, I don't think, obviously, they didn't use white and black, sometimes because they didn't have the wood. Up to the moment they didn't have ebony wood, they didn't have this chance. And I think they also said that sometimes white and red was due to the fact that it was the color of the king, the colors of the kings, the crowns, and so practically this is the game of the kings, and that's why they use those colors. At least that's what I heard. I'm not putting my hands on fire for that, okay? Now, we are going to watch Kasparov versus Ivanchuk from Linares 1999, because the importance of isolated pawn cannot be underestimated. Honestly, these pieces are a little strange, because to me it seems that some go on a certain direction, like this queen goes like that. The king goes a little forward. I don't know, maybe it's made on purpose. I don't know. Okay, the game, Kasparov was white and he played d4, d5, c4, d takes c4, knight f3, e6, e3. And here we see Ivanchuk that rightly fight for the center with c5. Notice in the book they don't actually give any kind of explanation for these moves, because the goal is not to explain the opening, but is to explain once you have an isolated pawn. So there is bishop takes e4, a6, so it means that black plans to play b5 and expand in that direction. Castle, knight f6, bishop b3, very interesting move. So probably white doesn't want to let black gain a tempo with b5 and move the bishop out of the way. Knight c6. As you can see, guys, they really develop their pieces. Knight c3. And now finally we have the isolated pawn. C takes d4. E takes d4. Bishop e7, rook e1, and of course Ivanchuk, knowing very well probably Kasparov games, doesn't leave the king in the center, because I have shown in other videos that Kasparov is definitely dangerous if you leave for 1 minute more than necessary your king in the center, right? So after castle there is a3, knight a5, and bishop c2. So a3 was probably made to avoid that black was taking control of b4, right? Now b5, and if you can, guys, try to pause the video right now and think what would you play in this situation. Why I tell you this? Because there are some critical moments in the game and some critical choices. So I don't know, in some cases it's really important, and I think in this case even this media, the fact that you are using a video can be very, very important, because you can pause the video and start to think, what would I do if I would be in Kasparov's shoes, right? Well, we have seen this move also in other games. The move is d5. And here it says, in fact, we have seen this sequence of moves in the game Kramnik Anand, annotated above. So there was another game, Kramnik Anand, that I don't know if I show. Let me see, because that could be interesting. There was a previous game, Kramnik Anand, that I didn't make a video, so I'm sorry guys, I didn't make a video. Kramnik Anand was played later, and black was in a better situation than Ivanchuk in Linares, facing a position he had not been able to consider in the piece of his own. Yeah, because this is the great thing of living in the 1990s, right? That you had the informant, a lot of other publications that immediately show you the games, so you didn't have to spend months before discovering a novelty, and that's a huge difference, right? So Anand came up with an improvement, because here in this game Ivanchuk played knight c4. The improvement that Anand played was rook e8. So here he played knight c4. Here it says that d5 advance is worrying black, and it is not a big secret why he plays this move, expecting the move bishop g5. And he plans to reply with knight b6 and then to take on d5. Okay, interesting. So that was the reason for knight c4. Okay, now pause the video again and try to find what white would play in this situation. White played Queen d3. Here it says played also with deep consideration for the d5 advance. Knight b6 is excluded by the strong reply knight d4, and the tension is kept. Yeah. Okay. So let's see, rook e8. And a4, attacking the pawn chain. This is not protected, so clearly there is a problem. Now black plays e takes d5, a takes b5, and black obviously cannot take, right, because otherwise you lose the rook here, and so he plays a5. b3. Okay, it seems there was a poopy diaper emergency, and I'm the only one who can actually change it. Okay, so let's see where we were here, because it made me clearly lose the thing of the video. Okay, let's move on. After a takes b5 and a5, b3. At this point black needs to move that knight, and this time is black that has the isolated pawn, while before it was white. So also notice how things can change over the board. He played knight d6, knight d4, bishop b7, and now there is f3. Here it says, here there is a diagram, and obviously the author, Grandmaster Marović, makes a big comment. He says, in a couple of moves the position has been thoroughly changed. Instead of a threat to black's king, which distinguished Kramnik's victory over an hand, our position is characterized by a number of static features. The first thing to notice is that the situation in the center has been turned upside down. Now it is black with an isolated pawn, or we should now say burden with an isolated pawn. It is well protected and at the moment but blockaded beyond hope of getting back its mobility. So in the isolated pawn, let's remind everyone of what it should be done, right? So the guy who has the isolated pawn, he wants to push it, right? The guy who doesn't have the isolated pawn, he doesn't want to exchange, he wants to exchange the pieces because in case of an endgame, his king will generally go in front of the isolated pawn and oblige the other king to lose control of that, at a certain point, because the other king will have to stop the other pawns from advancing, and in doing so he will lose the isolated pawn and probably the endgame. The guy who doesn't have the isolated pawn must have a very strong grip on the square before the isolated pawn. These are the things I remember on what should one do, and you must remember them too, because they are very, very important, right? So black in this case, he shouldn't exchange the pieces, because if he exchanges the pieces it makes it easier for white to enter a favorable endgame, right? So let's see what else Marović writes. Together with the pawn there is the light square bishop on b7, also blocked by its own d5 pawn. Apart from that, there is another weak spot in black's camp, the a5 pawn. Yeah, because it's isolated, right? Defended well enough for the moment, but potentially shaky. In comparison, white's double pawns on the b file, these two, do their duty. The b3 pawn controls the c4 square and the b5 pawn squeezes black. The f3 pawn, so the b3 pawn obviously controls the squares, and this controls some squares in the opponent territory, right? So it's perfect. Now, the f3 pawns denies the black knights the coveted e4 square. All that white needs now is to improve the position of his bishops, so these two, which have lost their primary target on the king side and are looking for a better view. Okay. So now, however, it was black's turn, because white just played f3, and black plays rook c8. White continue with knight a4. This is kind of a good move because he wants to try to control the square in the enemy territory, and plus he also blocked this, so it's not bad. Bishop f8, bishop g5, and now, wow, okay, so he played bishop g5 because now this could become a checkmate, right? If he takes on f6, queen takes h7, checkmate. So black is obliged to play g6. Queen d2, so now it probably wants to go here. And he says the light square bishop must be taken care of. It needs the d3 square. Okay, so he wants to put this here to probably keep a strong grip on b5. Let's see what happens. Rook takes e1, rook takes e1, knight d e8. Here it says Ivanchuk sets a nice trap which white passes by calmly. So what is the nice trap? Obviously the nice trap here is rook takes e8, because this cannot take back. Here there is the queen, right? Queen takes e8, bishop takes f6. The idea is queen to bring the queen, but he can't because of this. He just has gained material. And after which he plays bishop b4 and queen c1 and bishop a3, leading at repetition of moves. So let's see this thing in practice. Let's say that white actually takes on e8, right? Queen takes e8, bishop takes f6, bishop b4. Obviously if you go here now, it just probably return back and you have done nothing, right? So he says plays queen c1 and bishop a3, bring a repetition. Why a repetition? Because if he takes here, there is queen e1, checkmate, okay? So that's the real reason. Now, if instead of queen c1 goes on f2, right, there is a problem. The problem is this: bishop e1, a simple move, right? A little simple move. And when he plays queen f1, there is queen e3 check. King here, and then there is bishop h4. And here it says when black turns the table. What does it mean? The fact that this defends this, right? But if it takes here, this fall down. When this fall down, also that is attack. And so you can see it, however, in the position that black has more attacking things than white has. So that's why black is better in this position, right? So now let me return back to that position we saw. Okay, so we have seen that in this position to play rook takes e8 is not good, because after queen takes e8, bishop f6, black has a kind of trap that allows him to avoid the advantage, material advantage that white would have. With that said, we need to see what is the right move for white, right? So in this case, since now that you know that rook takes e8 is not the right move, you should try to pause the video and find out what is the right move, right? The right move, hoping that you pause the video, is rook e2. After which there is bishop b4, queen e3, rook c7, and bishop d3. And here there is a diagram. The comment is all very consistently played. Having decided that any minor piece endgame is in his favor, white happily agrees to the exchanges. So let's see what happens. Rook e7, queen c1, rook takes e2, bishop takes e2, and queen e7. Queen e3, queen takes e3, bishop takes e3. So as you can see, this is the what white wants, right? White wants to exchange all the pieces because if that happens, the endgame is in his advantage. He will put the king on d4, the other king will have to defend it, but then this will go forward, and when you lose this, you lose also the rest. So what's going on here? Let's see. Okay, here it says the truth about endgames begins with pawns. Once you have damaged your pawn structure, you have to live with it. In our game, they are a limiting factor for black. Okay, knight d7, knight c6, bishop takes e6, b takes e6, and knight b8. Bishop b6, so the problem is that if you take here bishop b5, you lose this one, right? So after bishop b6, black played bishop d6, knight c3, opla, sorry, knight c3, attacking the pawn d5, and bishop c7. And here white makes a mistake, which is bishop f2. So here it says, at the very end, after a long series of brilliant positional solutions, white stumbles. At first it's not easy to notice it, and Ivanchuk misses a concealed point. This serves as a reminder that a game of chess is not finished until the score sheets are signed. And I don't know if it was Tartakova, he said in reality the game is not decided up to the moment the arbiter put the result on the board, right? The kind of with all the results, yeah. So let's see. If white had played bishop c5 instead of bishop f2, bishop c5, then resignation would have been black's only reasonable option. But he played bishop f2. Okay, so let's see what happens. He played d4, and white continue with knight d5 and here resign. So here he says, however, just at the moment when Ivanchuk gave up, he could continue with knight takes e6, bishop b5, knight b4, knight takes b4, and now there is knight d6, regaining his piece with chances to save his king, as Jan Timman pointed out in detailed analysis. To us it matters little, the fine point we were looking for in the search for truth about the isolated pawn are all there. In the imaginative played opening and deep transition into the middle game, relying on motives and ideas which emphasize the most instructive elements of the characteristic position, in Kasparov Ivanchuk as well as most of the games we have analyzed, the advance of the central pawn is often seen early in the opening. Against a cautious and well-prepared opponent, that task is, as a rule, difficult to carry out successfully. Okay, so this is the end for this game, and that's very interesting. Because I remember there is another book which is titled Oops, I Resign Again, no? And it's a book all about these early resignations that you can see. It happened. Why? Because probably Ivanchuk's brain was tired. No, tired of defending, tired of finding solutions to problems that Kasparov continued to point to bring on. So as you can see, there is more to chess than just moving the pieces, have good calculation. The problem is that when you play classical chess and the game, it's a long time control game, not a rapid or blitz, your brain can get tired and you resign when you shouldn't, because if you had analyzed more, you would have found this solution that Jan Timman was able to find. I thank you for watching, and I think this was a very interesting game, both for the result and of course for knowing more about the isolated queen pawn. So please guys, try to give a look to this book, because it's really a great book. And why do I say that? Because I play correspondence chess, and I tell you, a couple of days ago I didn't know how to continue, because I asked myself the usual questions about forced moves, checks, and so on. And I couldn't find anything that black could do, up to the moment I realized at a certain point, with a kind of flash in my mind, oh my god, this is an isolated queen pawn, so I know perfectly well what to do. No? I need to push that pawn, but in order to push that pawn I need to eliminate the other pawns that are controlling the squares in front of my pawn, and so immediately in my mind I had the strategy and the moves, and I know why I'm playing in that way. You understand? So that's why we need a book like this, that's why we need to study pawn structures. Thank you very much for watching, see you next time.